Lieutenant Commander Marcus Gentle Giant Rodriguez stood 6 feet 4 inches tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of his team's expectations and a heart too big for the brutal world of Navy SEAL operations. His call sign wasn't meant as a compliment in the elite Special Forces community, where being labeled gentle was often seen as a weakness that could get you and your teammates killed. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training compound at Naval Special Warfare Command as Marcus watched his fellow SEALs prepare for another grueling day. At 28, he had already completed 3 combat deployments, saved countless lives, and earned the respect of his superiors through his tactical brilliance and unwavering dedication to his team. Yet whispers followed him wherever he went, whispers about his reluctance to use excessive force, his tendency to seek diplomatic solutions first, and his habit of checking on wounded enemies after firefights. Rodriguez, you're up for the combat demonstration, barked Master Chief Petty Officer Williams, a weathered veteran whose scars told stories of decades in special operations. The announcement sent ripples of anticipation through the assembled crowd of 250 elite commandos who had gathered for the annual inter-service training exercise. Representatives from Delta Force, Army Rangers, Marine Force Recon, and International Special Forces units filled the amphitheater-style training arena. Marcus felt the familiar knot in his stomach as he walked toward the center of the arena. These demonstrations were designed to showcase different combat techniques and fighting styles, but they often became informal proving grounds where reputations were made or destroyed. He had requested to demonstrate advanced medical trauma care or hostage negotiation techniques, but the brass wanted to show they wanted to see the gentle SEAL prove he could be as ruthless as the rest. The crowd's murmur grew louder as Marcus took his position. He could hear fragments of conversations carried on the wind. That's the one they called Gentle Giant. Heard he once talked a terrorist into surrendering instead of taking the shot. My money says he gets eaten alive out there. The comment stung, but Marcus had learned to channel that pain into focus. His opponent for the demonstration was Sergeant First Class Derek Hammer Thompson from the 75th Ranger Regiment. Thompson was everything Marcus appeared not to be: aggressive, intimidating, with a reputation for ending fights quickly and brutally. Standing 5 feet 10 inches of pure muscle, Thompson had never met a problem he couldn't solve with his fists. His cold blue eyes seemed to look right through Marcus as they faced each other in the center of the ring. "This should be interesting," Thompson said loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Finally, get to see if the SEAL's bark is worse than his bite." The crowd chuckled, and Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. He had faced down armed terrorists in war-torn cities, rappelled from helicopters into hostile territory, and survived situations that would break most men, yet somehow this moment felt more terrifying than any combat zone. As the two fighters circled each other, Marcus's mind drifted to the events that had shaped his reputation. He thought about Ahmed, the young insurgent he had captured during his second deployment to Afghanistan. The kid couldn't have been more than 17, scared and crying in a language Marcus didn't understand. While his team secured the area, Marcus had sat with the boy, offering him water and speaking in calm, reassuring tones despite not sharing a common language. By the time the interrogation team arrived, Ahmed had voluntarily provided information about 3 IED locations that saved countless civilian lives. "Focus, Rodriguez," he whispered to himself as Thompson began to close the distance between them. The demonstration was supposed to showcase hand-to-hand combat techniques, but Marcus could see in Thompson's eyes that this had become something more personal. This wasn't just about fighting techniques. This was about proving a point, about putting this soft SEAL in his place. The first exchange happened quickly. Thompson lunged forward with a powerful right hook aimed at Marcus's jaw. Marcus deflected the punch and stepped back, his defensive posture drawing boos from portions of the crowd. "Come on, SEAL. Fight back," someone shouted from the stands. Thompson pressed his advantage, throwing a combination of punches that Marcus deflected or absorbed, never once returning fire. "What's wrong, Gentle Giant?" Thompson taunted, his voice carrying across the arena. "Afraid to hurt me?" The mockery in his tone was designed to provoke, to push Marcus into making a mistake. Thompson had clearly done his homework, studying Marcus's reputation and psychological profile. Marcus absorbed another punch to his ribs, the impact sending waves of pain through his torso. He could have ended this exchange already. His training had given him dozens of ways to incapacitate Thompson quickly and efficiently. But something inside him always hesitated at that crucial moment, some voice that whispered about the value of human dignity and the weight of causing unnecessary harm. The crowd was growing restless. These elite warriors had gathered to see a demonstration of superior fighting techniques, not what appeared to be a one-sided beating. Marcus could hear the disappointment in their voices, could feel their respect for him evaporating with each defensive move he made. "This is embarrassing," he heard someone say. "How did this guy even make it through SEAL training?" The words cut deeper than Thompson's punches. Marcus had survived Hell Week, had pushed his body and mind beyond what he thought possible, had proven himself in combat time and again. Yet here, in front of his peers, he was being dismissed as weak. Thompson seemed to sense the shifting mood and decided to escalate. "You know what your problem is, Rodriguez?" he said between strikes. "You think this is some kind of game where everyone gets to go home happy. But the real world doesn't work that way. Sometimes you have to break things. Sometimes you have to break people." The words triggered something deep in Marcus's memory. He was suddenly back in Somalia 3 years earlier, facing a child soldier who couldn't have been more than 12 years old. The boy had a rifle pointed at Marcus's chest, his small hands shaking with fear and adrenaline. Marcus's team had the angle for a clean shot, but Marcus had held up his hand, asking for time. He had slowly removed his helmet, showing his face, and began speaking to the child in the few words of Somali he knew. "I have children too," he had said, even though he didn't. "I understand you're afraid. I'm afraid too." The boy had lowered his weapon, tears streaming down his face, and Marcus had wrapped him in his arms before calling for medical support. The intel that child provided later led to the rescue of 15 kidnapped aid workers. But Thompson didn't know that story. None of them knew the full story of who Marcus really was or what his gentleness had accomplished. All they saw was a man who seemed unwilling to fight with the intensity expected of elite Special Forces operators. "You're right about one thing," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely audible over the crowd noise. "Sometimes things do break." Thompson paused, perhaps hearing something different in Marcus's tone. "What did you say?" Marcus straightened up, rolling his shoulders to work out the tension from absorbing Thompson's punches. For the first time since the demonstration began, he made direct eye contact with his opponent. "I said you're right. Sometimes things break. But the question is whether they break by accident or by choice." The change in Marcus's demeanor was subtle but unmistakable. The defensive posture was gone, replaced by the fluid stance of someone who had spent countless hours mastering the art of combat. His breathing became controlled and rhythmic, and there was something in his eyes that made Thompson take an involuntary step backward. "You see, Thompson," Marcus continued, his voice now carrying clearly across the arena, "gentleness isn't weakness. It's control. It's the ability to choose exactly how much force is necessary, and no more. It's knowing that every life, even your enemies, has value, and taking that life should never be done casually." The crowd had grown quiet, sensing that something fundamental had shifted in the dynamic between the two fighters. Marcus began to move forward, and Thompson found himself backing up despite his size advantage and aggressive reputation. "But you're also right that sometimes we have to break things," Marcus said, his advance relentless and measured. "Sometimes we have to break the idea that strength comes from causing pain. Sometimes we have to break the notion that being gentle means being weak. And sometimes," he paused, now within arm's reach of Thompson, "we have to break the assumptions people make about who we are and what we're capable of." Thompson threw another punch, but this time Marcus was ready. He deflected the strike with minimal effort and, for the first time in the demonstration, went on the offensive. His movement was so fluid and precise that it seemed choreographed. Each strike calculated to demonstrate technique rather than inflict maximum damage. Yet the power behind each blow was undeniable. A quick jab to Thompson's solar plexus doubled him over, followed by a knee strike that lifted him off the ground. Marcus could have followed up with devastating effect, but instead, he stepped back, allowing Thompson to recover. The message was clear. Marcus could end this fight anytime he chose. The arena erupted in surprised murmurs. This wasn't the gentle, passive Seal they had expected to see dominated. This was a warrior operating at a level few of them had witnessed firsthand. Thompson straightened up, respect and wariness now evident in his expression. "You've been holding back this whole time," Thompson said, more statement than question. "I hold back until I don't need to anymore," Marcus replied. "The goal isn't to prove I can hurt you. The goal is to prove that I don't need to hurt you unnecessarily to accomplish the mission." What happened next would become legend in special forces circles for years to come. Thompson, perhaps frustrated by this unexpected turn of events, perhaps feeling humiliated in front of his peers, made a critical error in judgment. Instead of resetting and continuing the technical demonstration as intended, he let his ego take control. "You think you're better than us?" Thompson snarled, his professionalism cracking. "You think your way is superior? Let me show you what real fighting looks like." Thompson's next attack wasn't part of any demonstration. It was a wild, angry haymaker thrown with the full intention of causing serious harm. In that split second, Marcus faced a choice that would define not just this moment, but how he would be remembered by every elite warrior watching. He could continue to absorb the punishment, proving his gentleness but potentially suffering serious injury. He could respond with measured force, maintaining his principles while defending himself. Or he could show these hardened warriors exactly what 18 years of training, 3 combat deployments, and an unshakable moral code had forged. As Thompson's fist rocketed toward his head with enough force to cause a concussion, Marcus made his choice. But just as he began to move, a voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. "That's enough." The voice belonged to a woman, and it carried with it an authority that caused both fighters to pause mid-motion. Every head in the arena turned to locate the source of the interruption, and what they saw defied every expectation they had about this demonstration. Standing at the edge of the fighting circle was Captain Sarah Chun, a military psychologist assigned to evaluate the effectiveness of current training protocols. At 5 feet 6 inches tall, with an athletic build that spoke of dedication to physical fitness, she hardly looked like someone who belonged in an arena full of the world's most elite warriors. Yet something in her bearing commanded immediate attention. "This demonstration is over," she announced, stepping into the circle with confident strides. "Sergeant Thompson, return to your position with your unit. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, you're with me." Thompson's fist was still cocked back, confusion replacing anger on his face. "Ma'am, with respect, this is a military training exercise. Civilian contractors don't have authority to—" "Captain Chun, United States Army," she interrupted, her voice cutting through his protest like ice. "And I absolutely have the authority to stop this exercise when I observe it devolving from professional training into personal vendetta." The revelation that this woman was not only military, but outranked most of the men present sent ripples of surprise through the assembled crowd. Marcus found himself studying her more closely, noting the confidence in her posture, the way she positioned herself to maintain visual contact with both fighters while keeping escape routes clear, and something in her eyes that suggested she had seen more than her share of real combat. Thompson slowly lowered his fist, professionalism reasserting itself despite his obvious frustration. "Yes, ma'am. My apologies for the confusion." But as he turned to leave, he couldn't resist one final comment directed at Marcus. "This isn't over, gentle giant. Someday you're going to have to prove you're more than just talk and fancy footwork." As Thompson walked away, the crowd began to disperse, their disappointed murmurs filling the air. The demonstration that was supposed to showcase elite fighting techniques had ended in confusion and unresolved tension. Marcus stood in the center of the now emptying arena, feeling the weight of their judgment, and knowing that his reputation had somehow emerged even more complicated than before. Captain Chun remained in the circle, studying Marcus with professional interest. "That was quite a performance, Lieutenant Commander," she said after the crowd had moved out of earshot. "Which part?" Marcus asked, genuinely unsure whether she was referring to his initial restraint, his brief display of superior technique, or his willingness to continue absorbing punishment. "All of it," she replied, "but I'm particularly interested in your decision-making process. You had multiple opportunities to end that confrontation decisively, yet you chose escalation management instead. That suggests either exceptional discipline or dangerous hesitation." Marcus felt himself being evaluated, analyzed in a way that was both uncomfortable and oddly relieving. Most people looked at him and saw either weakness or strength, but Captain Shin seemed to be looking for something more complex. "In my experience, ma'am, the decision to use force should never be made lightly. Every situation offers multiple solutions, and violence should be reserved for when all other options have been exhausted." "An admirable philosophy," Chen replied. "But what happens when your teammates' lives depend on your willingness to act decisively? What happens when hesitation costs lives?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow because it touched on his deepest fear, that his commitment to minimizing harm might someday result in greater harm to those he was sworn to protect. It was a fear that kept him awake at night, that drove him to train harder than anyone else, that made him question every decision he made in the field. "I suppose," Marcus said carefully, "that's something I'll have to face if and when that moment comes. But I'd rather err on the side of preserving life than destroying it unnecessarily." Captain Chin nodded, making notes in a small tablet she had produced from her cargo pocket. "Tell me, Lieutenant Commander, what did you see when you looked at Sergeant Thompson during that confrontation?" The question surprised Marcus. He had expected her to ask about tactics or decision-making processes, not about his perception of his opponent. "I saw someone who was frustrated, possibly angry about something that had nothing to do with me. I saw someone who felt pressure to perform in front of his peers and was letting that pressure override his training and professionalism." "And how did that observation influence your response?" Marcus thought for a moment before answering. "It made me realize that this wasn't really about combat techniques or training demonstrations. It was about respect, reputation, and the way we define strength in our community. Thompson wasn't just fighting me. He was fighting against the idea that there might be another way to be a warrior." Captain Chin smiled for the first time since entering the arena, and Marcus was surprised to notice that it completely transformed her face. The stern military officer was replaced by someone who seemed genuinely pleased by his response. "That's a remarkably sophisticated analysis, Lieutenant Commander. Most operators would have focused on tactical considerations, range, timing, leverage advantages. You focused on the human element." "The human element is what makes all the difference," Marcus replied. "Tactics and techniques are important, but understanding why people do what they do, that's what allows you to predict their actions, to find solutions that don't require destroying them." As they talked, Marcus found himself studying Captain Chen more closely. There was something about her that didn't quite fit the typical profile of a military psychologist. Her movements were too fluid, her awareness too acute, her positioning too tactical. She moved like someone who had spent significant time in combat zones, not research facilities. "If you don't mind me asking, Captain, what's your background? You move like someone who's seen action." Chin's expression became guarded, and Marcus realized he might have overstepped. "I've had various assignments throughout my career, Lieutenant Commander. My current role is to evaluate the psychological aspects of special operations training and make recommendations for improvement." It was a perfectly reasonable answer that told him absolutely nothing, and Marcus suspected that was intentional. Before he could pursue the subject further, Master Chief Williams approached, his expression indicating that Marcus needed to report somewhere immediately. "Rodriguez, the old man wants to see you in his office." "Now." Williams glanced at Captain Sean with obvious curiosity, but didn't ask questions. As Marcus prepared to leave, Captain Chin handed him a business card. "I'd like to continue this conversation, Lieutenant Commander. I think you might have perspectives that could be valuable to my research." Marcus looked down at the card, noting that it contained only her name, rank, and a phone number. No unit designation, no email address, no indication of what organization she actually worked for. "I'd be happy to help with your research, ma'am." "Good. I'll be in touch." She turned to leave, then paused. "And Lieutenant Commander, don't let anyone convince you that gentleness is weakness. The world has enough warriors who know how to break things. It needs more who know how to heal them." As Marcus walked toward the command building, Captain Chin's words echoed in his mind. For the first time in months, he felt like someone understood what he was trying to accomplish, what he was fighting for beyond just mission success and unit cohesion. But as he approached the commander's office, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his encounter with both Thompson and Captain Shun was going to have consequences far beyond what he could currently imagine. Something about this day felt like a turning point, though he couldn't yet see where the path might lead. The weight of 250 pairs of eyes judging his performance still pressed down on him, along with the knowledge that his reputation in the special operations community had been irrevocably altered by what had happened in that arena. Whether that alteration was for better or worse remained to be seen, but Marcus was certain that the quiet life of a SEAL who preferred diplomacy to devastation was about to become much more complicated. The coffee shop off base was nearly empty at 0600 hours, which was exactly why Captain Sarah Chun had chosen it for their meeting. She sat in the corner booth with her back to the wall, a habit ingrained by years of operational security training, watching Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rodriguez navigate between tables while balancing 2 cups of coffee and what appeared to be an internal debate about whether this meeting was appropriate. 3 days had passed since the training demonstration, and Marcus still felt the weight of curious stares from his fellow SEALs. Word had spread quickly through the special operations community about the gentle giant who had embarrassed a ranger in front of 250 elite warriors, though the details grew more embellished with each retelling. Some versions had him defeating Thompson with a single devastating blow. Others suggested he had somehow used psychological manipulation to defeat his opponent without throwing a punch. "Thank you for meeting me," Sarah said as Marcus slid into the booth across from her. She had traded her military uniform for civilian clothes, dark jeans, a simple blue sweater, and minimal makeup that somehow made her appear both younger and more approachable than she had in the training arena. "I have to admit, Captain, I'm not entirely sure why I'm here," Marcus replied, wrapping his hands around the warm coffee cup. "Your message said you wanted to discuss my psychological profile, but this doesn't feel like an official evaluation." Sarah smiled, and Marcus noticed again how it transformed her entire face. "Because it's not. What I'm about to tell you is outside normal channels, and I need to know that it stays between us." The serious tone made Marcus straighten in his chair. In the special operations world, conversations that began with secrecy disclaimers usually led to either classified missions or career-ending scandals. "I'm listening." "My name is Sarah Chun. I am a captain in the United States Army, and I do hold a doctorate in psychology," she began. "But that's not why I was at your training exercise, and it's not why I'm here now." Marcus felt his awareness sharpen, the same heightened alertness he experienced when entering hostile territory. "Then, why are you here?" Sarah glanced around a coffee shop, confirming they remained alone before continuing. "I work for a joint task force that monitors emerging threats to special operations forces. Not external threats, internal ones. We look for indicators that elite units might be developing cultures or practices that could compromise mission effectiveness or violate operational ethics." "You're investigating my unit?" Marcus's voice carried an edge of protective anger. His SEAL team was composed of men he would trust with his life, professionals who had proven themselves in combat repeatedly. "Not investigating. Monitoring. There's a difference." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "Marcus, may I call you Marcus? Your actions and reputation have attracted attention at very high levels. Some people see your approach as innovative and psychologically sophisticated. Others see it as a dangerous deviation from established special operations doctrine. Marcus felt the familiar knot forming in his stomach. "And which side are you on?" "I'm on the side of figuring out what works," Sarah replied, "which is why I need to understand you better. Your psychological profile is unlike anything I've seen in 15 years of evaluating special operations personnel." The admission that she had 15 years of experience surprised Marcus. Sarah appeared to be in her early 30s, which would mean she had been evaluating special operations forces since her late teens. Either she was older than she looked, or there was more to her background than she was revealing. "What makes my profile so unusual?" Sarah pulled a tablet from her bag and swiped through several screens of data. Most special operations personnel score high in aggression, dominance, and risk tolerance while scoring lower in empathy and emotional sensitivity. It's a psychological makeup that serves well in combat situations where rapid, decisive action is required. She turned the tablet so Marcus could see a graph with his scores plotted alongside normal ranges for special operations personnel. "Your scores are almost completely inverted. High empathy, high emotional intelligence, moderate risk tolerance, and aggression scores that are actually below average for the general population." Marcus stared at the graph, feeling oddly exposed. "I assume that's not typical for someone in my position." "Not typical?" "Marcus, in 15 years of psychological evaluations, I've never seen a profile like yours in active special operations. Most people with your psychological makeup self-select out of military service entirely, or they're channeled into support roles rather than combat positions. Yet here I am," Marcus said quietly. "Does that make me a psychological anomaly or a mistake?" Sarah leaned back in her seat, studying him with professional intensity. "That's what I'm trying to figure out. On paper, you shouldn't exist. Someone with your psychological profile shouldn't have survived SEAL training, shouldn't have thrived in combat situations, and definitely shouldn't have earned the respect of teammates and superiors. But I have." "But you have," she agreed, which suggests either our psychological models are incomplete or you've developed compensatory mechanisms that allow you to function effectively despite having a fundamentally different psychological makeup than your peers. Marcus took a sip of his coffee, using the moment to process what Sarah was telling him. "So I'm either proving that psychology is wrong, or I'm some kind of freak adaptation." "Or," Sarah said, "you represent an evolution in special operations personnel that could revolutionize how we approach combat and conflict resolution." The weight of that statement settled between them. Marcus had never thought of himself as revolutionary or evolutionary. He was simply trying to be the best SEAL he could be while maintaining his core beliefs about the value of human life. "There's something else," Sarah continued. "Your recent actions have attracted attention from people who want to understand what you represent. Some of those people have resources and authority that extend far beyond the military chain of command." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. "What kind of attention?" "The kind that could either accelerate your career beyond anything you've imagined or end it completely." Sarah's tone was matter-of-fact, but Marcus could see concern in her eyes. "There are people who believe your approach could save countless lives and resolve conflicts that traditional special operations cannot. There are also people who believe you represent a dangerous softening of American military capability." Marcus set down his coffee cup with more force than intended, causing several drops to splash onto the table. "I never asked to become anyone's symbol or poster boy. I just want to serve my country and protect my teammates." "I know," Sarah said gently, "but sometimes we don't get to choose the roles history assigns us. What I'm trying to figure out is how to help you navigate what's coming without losing what makes you unique or getting you killed in the process." The bluntness of her statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. "Getting me killed? Are we talking about enemy action or friendly fire?" "Both are possible. There are elements within the special operations community who see your methods as dangerous precedent. They worry that if gentle warriors become acceptable, it might compromise the hard-edge mentality they believe is essential for mission success." Marcus thought about Sergeant Thompson's parting words after their confrontation, about the whispered comments he overheard in mess halls and training facilities. And these elements might be willing to create situations where my methods are tested to failure. It's possible, Sarah admitted, which is why I'm here. I want to help you prepare for what might be coming, but I need to understand more about how you think and operate. For the next hour, Sarah asked Marcus questions that probed deeper than any evaluation he had ever experienced. She wanted to know about his childhood, his motivations for joining the military, his decision-making processes in combat, and his long-term goals. But unlike typical psychological evaluations that felt clinical and detached, this conversation felt like two professionals trying to solve a complex problem together. "Tell me about Somalia," Sarah said eventually. "The incident with the child soldier." Marcus felt his entire body tense. That incident wasn't in any official report he knew of, which meant Sarah had access to information that went beyond normal military channels. "What do you know about that?" "I know about a lot of things that don't appear in official reports," Sarah replied. "But I want to hear your version of events." Marcus found himself describing that day in detail. The fear in the child's eyes, the weight of his team's weapons trained on a 12-year-old boy, the moment of decision when he chose to approach rather than engage. As he talked, he realized that Sarah was analyzing not just what he said, but how he said it, what details he chose to emphasize, and how the memory affected him emotionally. "You saved 15 aid workers that day," Sarah said when he finished. Information that Child provided led directly to their rescue. "But you've never put in for any commendations or recognition." "Because that's not why I did it," Marcus replied. "I didn't save that boy to get intelligence. I saved him because he was a child who needed help, and the intelligence was a byproduct. Everything else was a byproduct. The only thing that mattered in that moment was making sure a scared kid didn't die unnecessarily." Sarah made notes on her tablet, and Marcus had the unsettling feeling that his answer had either proven or disproven some theory she was developing about him. "Marcus, I'm going to share something with you that's classified at a level I'm probably not authorized to discuss," Sarah said, her tone becoming more serious. "But I think you need to understand the larger context of what's happening." She glanced around the coffee shop again before continuing. "There's a growing debate in the intelligence and special operations communities about the future of conflict resolution. Traditional military doctrine assumes that force projection and the credible threat of overwhelming violence are the primary tools for achieving strategic objectives." Marcus nodded, recognizing the fundamental philosophy that underpinned most special operations training. "But we're facing conflicts now that don't respond to traditional approaches," Sarah continued. "Insurgencies that are sustained by ideological rather than territorial motivations. Failed states where there's no clear enemy to defeat. Humanitarian crises where the use of force creates more problems than it solves. And you think my approach might be relevant to these new types of conflicts?" "I think your approach might be the key to solving conflict that have been considered unsolvable," Sarah said. "But there are powerful interests that see any deviation from traditional doctrine as weakness that will be exploited by our enemies." As Sarah spoke, Marcus began to understand the true complexity of his situation. He wasn't just a SEAL with an unusual psychological profile. He had become an unwitting symbol in a larger debate about the future of American military power. "What do you need from me?" Marcus asked. "I need you to continue being exactly who you are," Sarah replied. "But I also need you to be smarter about how you navigate the politics surrounding your reputation. There are people watching you who want to see you fail, and they're going to create opportunities for that failure." "Like Sergeant Thompson?" Sarah's expression became guarded. "Thompson might have been testing you on his own initiative, or he might have been encouraged by others. Either way, that confrontation was relatively harmless compared to what might be coming." The implication sent another chill through Marcus. "What kind of situations are we talking about?" "Missions where your methods will be tested under extreme pressure. Scenarios designed to force you into situations where gentleness appears to be the wrong choice. Circumstances where your team's safety depends on your willingness to abandon your principles." Marcus felt anger building in his chest. They would deliberately put my teammates at risk to prove a point. Some people would sacrifice individual operators to preserve what they see as essential military culture, Sarah said bluntly. Not because they're evil, but because they genuinely believe the alternative is national weakness that could cost thousands of lives. The weight of responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders like a physical burden. He had joined the SEALs to serve his country and protect innocent people, not to become a battleground for competing philosophies about the nature of warfare. "So what do I do?" he asked. "You get better," Sarah replied. "You train harder than anyone else. You study your craft until you're so skilled that nobody can question your competence. And you document everything so that when they try to discredit you, there's an unshakable record of your effectiveness." Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a small device that looked like a standard military communication unit. "This is a secure communication device. If you find yourself in a situation where you need advice, guidance, or extraction from compromised circumstances, use this to contact me. Anytime, any situation, no questions asked." Marcus took the device, noting its weight and the complexity of its interface. This was clearly military technology, but more sophisticated than anything he had seen in standard SEAL equipment. "Who exactly do you work for, Sarah?" For the first time since their conversation began, Sarah hesitated. "Let's just say I work for people who understand that the future of conflict resolution might require warriors who know how to heal as well as hurt." As they prepared to leave the coffee shop, Sarah placed a hand on Marcus's arm. "There's one more thing you need to know. Your actions in that training arena didn't just attract attention from the special operations community. There are other interests, civilian agencies, foreign intelligence services, private military contractors, who are also watching you now." "Are you saying I've become some kind of target?" "I'm saying you've become valuable," Sarah replied. "And valuable people in our line of work sometimes find themselves in complicated situations. The device I gave you isn't just for emergencies. It's also encrypted and monitored by people who can provide protection if necessary." As Marcus walked back to base, his mind raced with the implications of everything Sarah had told him. In the space of a single conversation, his understanding of his career and future had been completely transformed. He was no longer just Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rodriguez, SEAL Team operator. He had become a symbol, a test case, and potentially a target in conflicts he was only beginning to understand. But beneath the concern and uncertainty, Marcus felt something else, a sense of purpose that went beyond individual missions or unit objectives. If his approach to warfare really could save lives and resolve conflicts that traditional methods couldn't handle, then perhaps the risks were worth accepting. As he reached the base gate, Marcus made a decision that would define the next phase of his career. He wasn't going to hide from the attention or try to conform to others' expectations of what a SEAL should be. Instead, he was going to prove that gentleness and strength weren't contradictory qualities. They were complementary tools that, when properly applied, could accomplish objectives that pure aggression never could. But first, he needed to prepare for whatever tests and challenges were coming. Because if Sarah was right about the level of scrutiny he was under, his next mission might be designed specifically to break him. And Marcus was determined not to give anyone that satisfaction. 6 weeks after his conversation with Captain Sarah Chun, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rodriguez found himself in the most challenging situation of his military career. The mission briefing had seemed routine: extract a kidnapped American diplomat from a compound in the mountains of Eastern Europe. Standard SEAL operation, 48-hour timeline, minimal civilian casualties expected. But nothing about this mission had proven to be standard. Marcus crouched behind a stone wall, rain turning the rocky terrain into a treacherous landscape of mud and loose gravel. 50 meters away, the safe house where diplomat Jennifer Walsh was being held had become the center of a three-way firefight between a SEAL team, the original kidnappers, and a group of heavily armed mercenaries who had arrived unexpectedly and appear to be working for competing interests. "Sitrep, Rodriguez," came the voice of Commander James Mitchell through his earpiece. Mitchell was the team leader for this operation, a 20-year veteran whose reputation for getting things done had earned him respect throughout the special operations community. But Marcus had noticed something different about Mitchell's demeanor during this mission, a tension that seemed to go beyond normal operational stress. 3 hostiles neutralized on the north side, Marcus reported, checking his ammunition. But we've got a problem, sir. The mercenaries aren't just here for the diplomat. They seem to be specifically targeting our position. Through his scope, Marcus could see movement in the safe house windows. The original kidnappers, a local criminal organization with known international affiliations, had barricaded themselves inside with their hostage when the mercenaries arrived. What should have been a straightforward extraction had become a complex tactical puzzle where every decision carried enormous consequences. Copy that, Rodriguez. We're moving to flank from the south. Hold your position and maintain overwatch on the building. As Marcus settled into his sniper position, he reflected on the events that had led to this moment. The mission had felt wrong from the beginning. Too many last-minute changes, too much classified information withheld until arrival in theater, too many questions that weren't being answered. But it was Sarah's encrypted message 3 days earlier that had really set him on edge. Be careful. This one isn't what it appears to be. The sound of automatic weapons fire erupted from the south side of the compound, and Marcus could see his teammates engaging the mercenaries in brutal close-quarters combat. Through his scope, he watched Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, one of his closest friends, and a man whose family Marcus knew personally, take cover behind a disabled vehicle as bullets sparked off the metal around him. That's when Marcus saw something that changed everything. In his scope, he could see one of the mercenaries moving to flank Torres' position. The man carried a rifle with distinctive markings that Marcus recognized from previous operations. American-made weapons that should not have been in the hands of foreign combatants. But more disturbing was the mercenaries' tactical movement, which displayed training that Marcus had seen in only one place: American Special Operations Schools. "Command, we have a problem." Marcus spoke into his radio. "I'm seeing indicators that some of these mercenaries might be former American military." "Negative, Rodriguez," came Commander Mitchell's immediate response. "Intel shows all hostiles are foreign combatants. Maintain mission focus." But Marcus's scope didn't lie. As he tracked the mercenary stalking Torres, he could see American-style tattoos on the man's exposed arms, and his movement patterns were textbook special operations flanking maneuvers. This wasn't some hastily trained criminal. This was someone with advanced military training trying to kill his teammate. Marcus faced a choice that would define not just this mission, but everything he believed about his role as a SEAL. He could take the shot and neutralize the threat to Torres, following standard operational protocol. But doing so might mean killing a fellow American serviceman, possibly someone who had served with distinction before whatever circumstances led him to this mountainside. Alternatively, he could try to incapacitate rather than kill, risking Torres' life for the sake of preserving the life of someone who was actively trying to murder his teammate. The mercenary raised his weapon, taking aim at Torres, who was completely unaware of the threat approaching from his blind spot. Marcus had perhaps 3 seconds to make his decision. In that crystalline moment of absolute clarity, Marcus understood that this entire situation had been engineered specifically for him. Someone had created a scenario where his philosophical commitment to preserving life would be tested against his duty to protect his teammates. Someone wanted to see if the gentle giant would choose principles over pragmatism when lives hung in the balance. Marcus made his choice. Instead of targeting the mercenary directly, he shifted his aim to the wall just above the man's head and fired. The bullet struck the stone with a sharp crack, sending fragments showering down and causing the mercenary to duck for cover. In that same instant, Marcus activated his laser designator and painted the mercenary's position, allowing Torres to identify and neutralize the threat himself. "Torres, hostile on your 6 o'clock, 20 meters behind the blue truck," Marcus transmitted. Torres spun and engaged, putting down the mercenary with 3 precise shots to the chest. The threat was eliminated, Torres was safe, and Marcus had avoided making a kill that might haunt him for the rest of his career. But as he watched through his scope, Marcus saw something that made his blood run cold. The wounded mercenary was still alive, reaching for something in his vest pocket. Not a weapon, a communication device. In his dying moments, the man was sending a signal. All units, abort mission immediately. Marcus transmitted on the emergency frequency. We're compromised. This is a setup. Rodriguez, maintain radio discipline. Commander Mitchell's voice snapped back. Continue mission as briefed. Before Marcus could respond, the radio crackled with a new voice, one he recognized with relief and growing concern. "Whiskey Team, this is Overwatch," came Captain Sarah Chen's voice. "You have multiple hostile vehicles approaching your position from the south and east. Estimated arrival in 5 minutes. Recommend immediate extraction." Marcus felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Sarah was providing Overwatch for this mission, which meant the joint task force she worked for had anticipated that something like this might happen. They had been watching, waiting to see how he would perform when tested under the most extreme pressure. "Command, this is Rodriguez," he transmitted. "Request permission to attempt diplomatic contact with the original kidnappers. If we can negotiate release of the hostage, we avoid civilian casualties and get our people out before reinforcements arrive." "Negative," Mitchell responded immediately. "We go with the assault plan. Stack up on the building in 30 seconds. Marcus could see his teammates beginning to move toward the safe house, preparing for a violent entry that would likely result in the death of everyone inside, including the diplomat they were supposed to rescue. The approaching reinforcements would arrive in the middle of the assault, creating a massacre that would leave no survivors. Unless he could change the equation. "Sarah, are you monitoring the safe house communications?" Marcus asked on the secure frequency Chun had given him. "Affirmative. The kidnappers are terrified. They're criminals who took a hostage for money, not hardened terrorists. They're looking for a way out of this situation." Marcus made a decision that would either save everyone or get him court-martialed. "I'm going in." "Rodriguez, hold position," Mitchell commanded. "That's a direct order." "With respect, sir, I'm invoking emergency protocols," Marcus replied. "I have reason to believe this entire operation has been compromised, and following the current plan will result in unnecessary casualties, including the hostage." Marcus left his sniper position and began moving toward the safe house, his rifle slung across his back and his hands visible. It was the most dangerous walk of his life, exposed to fire from the kidnappers, the surviving mercenaries, and potentially his own teammates if they decided his actions constituted insubordination under fire. As he approached the building, Marcus began speaking in the local language, his voice carrying clearly across the compound. "My name is Marcus Rodriguez. I'm an American soldier. I know you didn't want this fight. Neither did we. Let's find a way for everyone to go home alive." The gunfire from inside the building stopped. Through broken windows, Marcus could see movement as the kidnappers repositioned to get a better look at him. He stopped 20 meters from a building, close enough to be heard clearly, but far enough to dive for cover if negotiations failed. "You're surrounded," Marcus continued. "More soldiers are coming. But I don't think you're bad people. I think you're people who made a mistake, and now you're scared. I understand being scared. I'm scared too." A voice called out from inside the building in heavily accented English. "You Americans killed our friends. Why should we trust you?" "Because I'm not asking you to trust Americans," Marcus replied. "I'm asking you to trust me." One person talking to another. "I don't want to hurt you, and I don't think you really want to hurt anyone either." Through his earpiece, Marcus could hear frantic conversations between his teammates and command. Some voices advocated for immediate extraction. Others called for him to be arrested for insubordination. But he also heard something else. Sarah Chun coordinating with higher authorities, purchasing time for his diplomatic attempt. "What do you want?" the voice from the building called. "I want the American woman to go free," Marcus replied. "I want you to go free. I want my friends to go free. I want everyone to go home to their families tonight. The soldiers outside, they will kill us if we surrender." Marcus turned to look at his teammates, who had taken defensive positions around the compound. "No one is going to hurt you. You have my word as a soldier and as a man." For long minutes, nothing happened. Marcus stood in the open ground between two armed forces, completely vulnerable, waiting to see if his faith in human decency would be rewarded or if it would get him killed. Then the front door of the safe house opened, and a young woman stumbled out. Jennifer Walsh, the kidnapped diplomat, looked shaken but unharmed. She ran toward Marcus's position, and he caught her as she collapsed with relief and exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered. "I knew someone would come for me." Behind her, 5 men emerged from the building with their hands raised. They looked exactly like what Marcus had suspected, local criminals who had gotten in over their heads and were grateful for any opportunity to escape alive. As Marcus's teammates moved to secure the kidnappers, Commander Mitchell approached with an expression that mixed relief, anger, and something that might have been respect. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest," Mitchell said. "Maybe both," Marcus replied, helping the diplomat to her feet. "But everyone's alive, and that's what matters." The sound of approaching vehicles reminded everyone that the mission wasn't over. The mercenary reinforcements were still coming, and the team needed to extract immediately. As they moved toward the extraction point, Sarah Chen's voice came through Marcus's earpiece on a private channel. "You did well, but you should know that everything that happened here today was being recorded and evaluated. Your actions are going to have consequences far beyond this mission." "Good consequences or bad consequences?" Marcus asked as he helped the diplomat into the extraction helicopter. "That depends on who's making the decisions," Sarah replied. "But you proved something important today. You proved that there are situations where traditional special operations doctrine fails, but your approach succeeds. You saved lives that would have been lost otherwise." As the helicopter lifted off, Marcus looked down at the compound where the confrontation had taken place. Local authorities were already arriving to process the kidnapped criminals, who would likely serve short sentences before returning to their families. The mercenaries' bodies would be investigated by international authorities who would undoubtedly uncover connections that reached high into various intelligence agencies. But Jennifer Walsh was alive and unharmed. His teammates were all returning home safely. And Marcus had once again proven that strength and gentleness weren't contradictory qualities. They were complementary tools that, when properly applied, could accomplish objectives that pure aggression never could. 3 hours later, Marcus sat in a debriefing room at a secure facility outside the capital city, facing a panel of senior officers whose expressions ranged from impressed to deeply concerned. His actions during the mission would be analyzed, evaluated, and ultimately judged by people whose careers had been built on very different philosophical foundations. Commander Mitchell sat at one end of the panel table, having already given his report on the mission's tactical aspects. Captain Sarah Chun sat at the other end, representing interests that Marcus still didn't fully understand but had come to trust. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez began Admiral Patricia Hayes, a woman whose reputation for tactical brilliance was matched only by her intolerance for deviation from established protocols. "Your actions today achieved the mission objective with minimal casualties and no loss of American life. However, you also directly disobeyed orders from your commanding officer and placed yourself and your team at unnecessary risk." Marcus stood at attention, prepared to accept whatever consequences his actions had earned. "Yes, ma'am. I take full responsibility for my decisions during the operation." "The question," Admiral Hayes continued, "is whether those decisions represent innovative thinking that should be incorporated into future operations or dangerous insubordination that undermines military discipline." For the next 2 hours, Marcus faced intense questioning about every aspect of his decision-making process. The panel wanted to understand not just what he had done, but why he had done it, and whether similar approaches could be systematically applied to other special operations. When the formal debriefing concluded, Marcus was surprised to find Admiral Hayes waiting for him in the corridor outside. "Walk with me, Lieutenant Commander," she said, leading him toward a secluded balcony that overlooked the city lights. "I've been following your career for some time," Admiral Hayes began once they were alone. "Your psychological profile, your operational record, your impact on unit morale, and mission effectiveness. You represent something we haven't seen before in special operations." Marcus remained silent, uncertain whether this conversation was leading toward commendation or career termination. 20 years ago, I would have court-martialed you for what you did today," Admiral Hayes continued. "Military discipline exists for good reasons, and soldiers who ignore direct orders in combat situations create risks that extend far beyond their individual missions." She paused, looking out over the city where millions of people were going about their evening routines, completely unaware of the life and death decisions that had been made on their behalf just hours earlier. "But the nature of conflict is changing," she said finally. "We're facing threats that don't respond to traditional military approaches. We need operators who can think beyond conventional doctrine, who can find solutions where pure force fails." Admiral Hayes turned to face Marcus directly. "You're being recommended for promotion to full commander and transfer to a new joint task force that will handle unconventional operations requiring specialized psychological and diplomatic skills." The news hit Marcus like a physical blow. Promotion and reassignment meant leaving his SEAL team, the men who had become his brothers through shared hardship and mutual trust. "With respect, ma'am, I'd prefer to remain with my current unit. These men are my teammates, my responsibility." Admiral Hayes smiled, the first genuinely warm expression Marcus had seen from her. "Commander Rodriguez, your teammates will be fine. But there are situations developing around the world where your unique skills are desperately needed. Situations where traditional special operations would fail, but your approach might succeed." As if summoned by the conversation, Sarah Chun appeared on the balcony. "Marcus, I wanted to congratulate you on today's mission and let you know that you'll be working with my task force going forward." "Your task force?" Marcus looked between the two women, finally understanding the larger picture. "You're military intelligence, aren't you?" "Among other things," Sarah replied. "Our mandate is to develop new approaches to conflict resolution that combine traditional special operations capabilities with advanced psychological and diplomatic techniques. Basically, we're trying to create a new type of warrior, one who knows when to fight and when to heal." Admiral Hayes checked her watch and prepared to leave. "You'll receive your official orders tomorrow, Commander Rodriguez. But I wanted to tell you personally that what you accomplished today gives me hope that we're evolving beyond the limitations that have constrained military operations for decades." After Admiral Hayes left, Marcus and Sarah stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle in the darkness below. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked eventually. Marcus thought about the question seriously. The promotion meant greater responsibility, more dangerous missions, and the constant scrutiny that came with being an experimental approach to special operations. But it also meant the opportunity to prove that his methods could save lives and resolve conflicts that traditional approaches couldn't handle. "I'm ready," he said finally. "But I have one condition." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You're hardly in a position to negotiate conditions. If I'm going to be the test case for this new approach to special operations, then I want complete autonomy over how missions are conducted. No interference from commanders who don't understand what we're trying to accomplish." Sarah smiled, and Marcus realized that his condition had been exactly what she expected him to request. "Done," she said. "Welcome to the future of special operations, Commander Rodriguez. Try not to get us all killed while you're reinventing warfare." As Marcus looked out over the peaceful city, he thought about the long journey that had brought him to this moment. From a young man who believed that strength and gentleness could coexist, to a SEAL struggling with his reputation as too gentle for special operations, to a commander tasked with proving that the future of conflict resolution might require warriors who knew how to heal as well as hurt. The path ahead would be dangerous, controversial, and filled with people who wanted to see him fail. But for the first time since joining the SEALs, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he belonged, at the forefront of an evolution that could transform not just special operations, but the entire nature of how conflicts were resolved. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, and new opportunities to prove that sometimes the most powerful weapon wasn't the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to know when destruction wasn't necessary. As he and Sarah walked back inside to begin planning for whatever came next, Marcus carried with him the knowledge that his journey from gentle giant to respected commander had really just begun. The true test would be whether he could train others to walk the same path, creating a new generation of warriors who understood that genuine strength came not from the capacity to cause harm, but from the discipline to choose exactly the right amount of force for each situation. The future of special operations, and perhaps the future of conflict itself, might depend on getting that balance exactly right.